Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. Just a little note, I have a subscription service available for this podcast series. You're able to get the episodes released to you a week prior, and you also get access to bonus episodes. There are currently 11 bonus episodes available to you to listen to, and they are exclusively only to subscribers. For only the price of a coffee a month, you can sign up. Some of the bonus episodes: there is one on Alphaeus Barrington's son, Jack Barrington, who was a mystery to me largely, and I uncovered some really interesting information about him. He was a professional whistler who travelled around South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales. There's also an extra episode to The Tracker, where it talks about the ladies from Warringah's Mission and uncovers some interesting information about the Aboriginal ladies that came from that area and the links to episodes. I've also got Ray Blair's extra to her episodes on Theo's duty. And I've also got some follow-up episodes related to the Deniliquin bank robbery, Harry Power and his family in Australia, the bushranger Frank Gardner, his family as well, are covered in a bonus episode. So I would appreciate it if you would consider assisting me in my research in the time that it takes and sign up to subscribe. I also have a Facebook page, so when you're listening to the stories, tune into the Facebook page, Family History Mysteries, as I add photos and documents and other pictures that relate to the person, so you can put a face to the name as you're listening to the podcast. Episode 85, the first triplets to be born in colonised Australia. The first triplets born in colonised Australia were featured on the front page of the Sydney Gazette on Saturday, the 19th of January, 1806. And it read, "On the night of last Sunday, Amelia Rixon, the wife of a private in the New South Wales Corps, safely delivered 3 infants, 2 of whom are living and are having a very promising appearance." The triplets were the children of convicts James Rixon, who arrived in New South Wales in 1798, and Amelia Goodwin, who arrived in 1800. The triplets' father, James Rixon, was born in about 1770 in Ilkstone, Derbyshire, England. When James was 22, he was charged with privately stealing 9 guineas in the house of William Webster of Ilkeston on the 24th of October 1791. He was convicted on the 19th of March 1792 to be hanged at the Derby Assizes, but his sentence was commuted to transportation for life. Before transportation occurred, James was removed from prison and spent several years on board the Prudentia, a prison hulk at Woolwich, Kent, where he worked wearing leg irons at His Majesty's dockyard. James Rixon was also listed in some records as James Hickson, and the spelling of Rixon in most of the records is Rixon. However, his surname was also spelled Rickson, or was spelled Rexon. He was transported on the ship Barwell on the 7th of November 1797, so 6 years after his court case. As Joy Walsh reported in her book, there was an incident on board the Barwell during its trip to Australia. Although the ship's log is silent on the matter, a private letter states that on the passage to the Cape, 25 prisoners had planned to seize control of the vessel while the sailors were aloft and murder the officers. The plot was disclosed by an informer the night before the attempt was to be made. The next morning, as the convicts reached the deck, the conspirators were seized, double-ironed and chained together. The ship was detained at the Cape until the 19th of March because their officers, fearing that they would not find a profitable market at Port Jackson, desired to dispose of their European trade goods. Soon after leaving the Cape, another plot was allegedly hatched between the convicts and the soldiers to combine to seize the ship. The ship finally arrived safely in New South Wales on the 18th of May, 1798. After 3 years working as a convict, James Rixon obtained a conditional pardon and he enlisted in the New South Wales Corps on the 25th of March, 1801. He seemed to have a fairly clean record as a convict, and in 1801, after his enlistment in the Corps, he was placed in the Gross Paterson detachment, and then in 1802 to 1803 was in the Paterson detachment. It was likely in about 1802 that James commenced his de facto relationship with Amelia Goodwin. They had their son William in 1802, and they firstly lived near the military barracks in Sydney and then moved to the Hawkesbury district and later lived at Windsor. Amelia Goodwin, also known as Anne Goodwin or Amy Goodwin, was actually born Amelia Granger on the 7th of May 1771, the daughter of John Granger and Mary Hannah Jarvis. She married John Goodwin in Middlesex, England on the 27th of May 1792 when she was 21. John Goodwin died in 1798 in Kent, England. Amelia was convicted at the Summer Assizes in Maidstone on the 15th of July 1799, and it stated Anne Goodwin, aged 29, was stealing in the dwelling house of Jane Couldry and Robert Couldry, her employers in Greenwich, within 10 months last past, of 6 waistcoats, 7 shirts, 3 pairs of stockings, 2 shawls, 7 handkerchiefs, 2 pillowcases, 3 pairs of breeches, 1 coat, 4 books, 1 blue frock, 1 cap, 1 child's clout, 4 curtains, 5 aprons, 1 cloak, 6 knives, 6 forks, 1 tablecloth, 1 breakfast cloth, and 1 round frock. As a result, she was transported for 7 years. Anne Goodwin was also referred to as Amy in the court documents. Amelia Goodwin was transported on the ship Speedy in November 1799 and arrived in New South Wales on the 16th of April 1800. She was listed as Anne Goodwin in the 1806 census, stating she was free by servitude and living with James Rixon. By 1804 to 1805, James Rixon was with the Wilson detachment, and in 1805 there was an article mentioning James in the Sydney Gazette and New South Wales Advertiser on the 8th of September 1805. James Rixon of the New South Wales Corps begs leave to inform the public in general that he makes wood screws of all dimensions and that any orders may be favoured with will be executed on the shortest notice and with the most reasonable terms. So not only is he working for the Corps, but he has a little side business as well. The triplets were born on the 19th of January 1806. There was Benjamin, James, and the third was stillborn and was unnamed. On the 17th of November 1807, for some reason, James Rixon was discharged on a regiment court-martial, and unfortunately there's no detailed evidence as to the reason for this. Amelia and John Rixon then had sons Thomas, who was born in 1808, and Henry John in 1810. James Rixon died at only 41 years old in Windsor, New South Wales on the 7th of April 1811. The cause of death was not listed on his certificate. He was buried at St Matthew's Anglican Church Cemetery at Windsor, and his memorial plaque that was placed by his descendants in 2016 stated, "In memory of James Rixon, buried in this cemetery on the 7th of April 1811, tried in Derby 1792 as James Hickson, arrived on the 17th of May 1798 on the Barnwell, and Amelia Goodwin, buried at St Peter's, Campbelltown as Amelia Burrows, tried at Maidstone, Kent in 1798, arrived on the 16th of April 1800 on the Speedy, erected on behalf of over 15,000 Rixon family descendants." So upon James Rixon's death, this left Amelia with 5 sons, 9 and under, the youngest only being an infant. Although they never formally married, Amelia was recognised as James's wife and received his land grant after his death, and it was officially granted to her on the 8th of October 1816. Amelia, listed as Emma Goodwin, married Robert Burrows of the district of Ayres on the 23rd of December 1816. They had a son, Robert Burrows, in 1816. So Robert Burrows Sr. was born in 1780 in Staffordshire, England. At the Stafford Assizes on the 24th of July 1799, Robert Burrows was convicted of stealing a store pig, a turkey and a fowl, and he was transported for 7 years. He departed England in August 1800 on the ship Earl Cornwallis. In November 1828, Amelia is listed as living at Aydes, New South Wales, with her sons Benjamin and Thomas Rixon. The census outlines that they have 30 acres cultivated with 2 horned cattle. Amelia's marriage to Robert Burrows was short-lived. On the 25th of January 1820, Robert Burrows accidentally drowned. His body was found entangled in weeds at the bottom of the creek at Aspinall's farm near Windsor. Amelia, listed as Amelia A. Burrows, died at Campbelltown, New South Wales in 1834 at the age of 63, and her son William is buried alongside her. James and Amelia's children. William Rixon, he was born on the 17th of October 1802 at Sydney Cove. In 1821, William Rixon was granted 60 acres of land at Campbelltown, but quickly exchanged it for 10 acres of land nearby that had already been cleared. William married Anne Hoare on the 23rd of January 1826 at St Peter's in Campbelltown. Anne was only 14 at the date of their marriage, and she was the daughter of John Hoare and Elizabeth Love. Only a few months after their marriage, on the 27th of May 1826, in the Sydney Australian, there's a mention at Liverpool Court. William Rixon appeared to answer to a summons requiring him to well and truly answer make unto certain matters touching and concerning one Charles Walton. It appeared in evidence that Walton was in the defendant's employment and had occasion to leave, requested a settlement for the farmer, which being had, it was found that a balance yet was remained owing to Watson of 3 months' wages, and 5 shillings, which the latter had lent to the former. All this was admitted by the defendant, who notwithstanding attempted to put a set-off of 1 shilling 6 a week, the plaintiff having been victualled, at the table of the defendant. But this the bench refused to allow, and recommended the defendant to pay up his legal balance, and by that means to save the trouble and expense of it being covered in a civil way at the Court of Requests. In the first few years of marriage, William and Anne lived at the Field of Mars before moving to the Campbelltown district of Aydes and Appin, where they began to farm with the assistance of convict labour. By 1830, on their 10-acre property at Campbelltown, they had 20 head of cattle and a team of bullocks. It was then that William applied for a further grant of 50 acres adjoining his existing land. However, he was ruled ineligible, perhaps on the grounds of the earlier allocation. Around the time of the birth of their daughter, Sarah, in November 1839, William and Anne moved to Spring Creek, where they managed the Stringy Bark Inn, a property owned by William's brother Benjamin. William also had other hotel interests in the area. An article mentions that William Rixon is licensed at the Travellers' Rest along the Old Coach Road between Mount Kira and Appin. The location was known as Stringy Bark, or on some maps as Lachlan Forest. Licensing records state that Rixon's Inn was located 29 kilometres from Wollongong and 17 kilometres from Appin. The licence was described as a wine and beer licence, not a publican's licence, which indicates that the inn was merely a refreshment stop for travellers and it offered no accommodation. Documents reveal the inn was under construction along the Appin to Mount Kira Road in May 1839. However, no records of the inn receiving a licence can be found for another 3 years. Although Rixon moved on to another public house later that year, the inn probably continued in operation for several years as an unlicensed wayside stop for coaches and travellers until 1848, when Mount Kira was replaced by Rixon's Pass at Woonona as the preferred mail route over the escarpment. William Rixon became the licensee of the Union Revived Hotel at Appin later in 1842. The Sandstone Inn is still in existence as a private home and is located opposite St Bede's Roman Catholic Church on the main road through Appin Village. Appin had 2 licensed inns at this time, the Union Revived Hotel and the Burke Hotel. Both had been in existence since 1826. Appin was the first large settlement reached after leaving Wollongong for Sydney. According to the New South Wales State Records, that William was the licensee of the Union Revived Inn at Appin, 1843 and 1844. In 1847, he was the publican of the Hope Inn at Campbelltown, and then it lists Anne as the licensee of the Hope Inn at Campbelltown in 1848. as William Rixon died on the 28th of May 1847 at Campbelltown, and as mentioned, he's buried beside his mother. After William's death, Anne married twice more. On the 11th of June 1848, she married Owen Dunlagan, who died in January 1851, and then a year after her second husband's death, on the 24th of January 1852, Anne married William Henry Phibbs, whom she had one child, William Jordan Phibbs, and he was the licensee of the Golden Fleece. In the Sydney Morning Herald on the 26th of January 1863, there is a listing by Phibbs which says, "I, the undersigned, hereby caution the public not to give credit to my wife, Anne Phibbs, as I will not be answerable for any debts she may contract after this date. W.H. Phibbs, Castlereagh, Sydney." So things obviously weren't well. Normally, if you had a husband place an ad like that in the paper, the couple had separated and the husband was not willing to incur any debts by his wife. So William Henry Phibbs died on the 24th of November 1863, so only later in that year that he placed that advertisement. In 1882, Anne lived at Castlereagh Street on the east side between Goulburn and Campbell Street, and she died at Wallara on the 8th of August 1895, aged 94, and she's buried at the Roman Catholic Cemetery in Waverley. Had she lived a little longer, she would have inherited £1,000 from her younger brother, as she was named in his will. It stated, "To my sister, Anne Phibbs, widow of William Phibbs, the sum of £1,000. But if my said sister shall predecease me, I bequeath the said sum of £1,000 to her son, William Jordan Phibbs, my nephew." So her son was the benefactor of that. The children of William Rixon and Anne Hall. The first was Elizabeth. She was born on the 5th of April 1830 at Aird's, and she died on November the 18th at 1856 at Camden, aged only 26. Their second child, Amelia Ann Rixon, was born in 1832 at Aird's. She married John Sweetman in 1859 at Parramatta, Sydney, the year after her first husband, George Augustus Sheffield, died. Amelia and John had 7 children, and they lived in various places throughout their marriage: Campbelltown, Eden, Brisbane, Ballarat and Bendigo. The third child, John William, was born on the 10th of April 1835 at Aird's. He was a police constable, and John William Rixon married at St Matthew's in Albury on the 17th of September 1859 to Elizabeth Wise Smith. He died on the 12th of April 1931, aged nearly 89 years, and was buried at Albury. John left Aird's as a young man to go to Cumberuna to help his uncle Andrew Hall with the cattle run that he leased there, and that's where he met Elizabeth Smith. John and Elizabeth had 15 children. So after working for his uncle, he leased a cattle run in a place called Grania, and the property remained in the family until after 1931. John suffered a heart attack and died on the 23rd of November 1904, aged 69. The fourth child of William Rixon and Anne Hall was Martha Rixon, and she was born on the 31st of August 1837 at Aird's, and she died on the 1st of December 1839 at Spring Creek near Wollongong, New South Wales. Sarah Rixon was born on the 1st of November 1839 at Aird's and died on the 9th of August 1924 at Eden. Thomas Rixon was born on the 31st of January 1843 in Stringybutt Mountain Road, Appin. In 1867, Thomas married the eldest child. Thomas married Jane Ann Lang near Eden, and John Rixon died on the 20th of October 1901 at Wyndham. Robert Andrew Rixon was born on the 18th of August 1847 in Appin. He married Mary Josephine Kennedy on the 17th of June 1878 at Albury, and he died in Albury in 1918. The second child of James Rixon and Amelia Goodwin was the firstborn of the triplets, Benjamin, born on the 5th of January 1806. In the 1828 census, he's listed as a constable and a Protestant living with his mother and his brother William. And Benjamin married Margaret Finnemore on the 26th of October 1829 at St Peter's Church of England, Campbelltown. They had 12 children, and Benjamin moved to the Illawarra area with his wife prior to the birth of their first child, Henry John. Benjamin was highly respected in the Illawarra district, where he lived his entire married life. He was a man of many parts. At various times he was a constable, but also a farmer, coach driver, mail contractor, road builder and shipbuilder, but he was perhaps best known for his abilities as a bushman and a tracker. The Illawarra Mercury contains accounts of the discovery by Benjamin of the body of Gorman in treacherous waters of Jordan's Creek and the successful search for Mr. Charles Quinn in 1857. And again in 1858, where he led a rescue party in search of Mrs. Dwyer and her 2 young boys. Following a subscribed public testimonial, Henry was presented with a silver salver engraved with, "Presented to Benjamin Rixon with a purse of 100 sovereigns." At a public meeting held at Wollongong on the 31st of August 1857, in testimony of the respect in which he is universally held by the inhabitants of the Illawarra and neighbouring districts, resolute and sagacious, he was ever found, ready to aid in the preservation of life and property and in the detection of crime. His search for and discovery of Charles Quinn, after a protracted period of 9 days in the wilds of the Illawarra mountain range, accompanied by several humane individuals, by which an aged man was saved from starvation and death, fully evincing his philanthropy. Benjamin's tracking knowledge allowed him to map and create in 1848 the Rixon's Pass Road, which was about 14 miles in length from Appin over the escarpment towards Wollongong. And during World War II, the Australian Army made the road impassable by building a large tank trap at the top of Rixon's Pass to prevent the threat of the Japanese Army's invasion forces having free access over the Illawarra Range. Benjamin operated a daily mail run between Campbelltown, Appin, Wollongong and Dapto through Rixon's Pass in the mountains south of Sydney. And Benjamin died at the age of 80 years on the 20th of July 1886 at Bulli, New South Wales, at the home of his son James, and he's buried in an unmarked grave at St Augustine's Church, Bulli. The Illawarra Mercury in Wollongong announced his death on the 22nd of July 1866. The late Mr. Benjamin Rixon, who in the colony has not heard of Ben Rixon, who for well nigh half a century was the most famous and successful tracker in Australia. In the course of the acting portions of his long life, he tracked many a man over hill and dale, alike in the interests of humanity and law and order, but now at last he himself has crossed the bourne from which no traveller returns. After a protracted illness of 2 or 3 years, he died last Tuesday. In the course of his life, he rendered much valuable service to the country, in a public sense as well as privately to persons requiring his aid as a tracker. Many a person was rescued from the wilderness by Mr. Rixon. As a tracker, he was superior to any of the quick-eyed Aboriginals of the country, and his unequalled power in that respect caused him to be sought after far and wide when any persons were lost in the bush, or the government required the whereabouts of some desperado to be ascertained by the police. He was a native of Parramatta, being one of a triplet birth. After living in that locality and the Campbelltown district for a time, he settled at American Creek. There he reared a large and respectable family, and about 15 years ago, the land passed out of his hands. Since then, he has resided with members of his family, and occasionally with Mr. P.R. Cole, the customs officer of this port, who at all times treated the old man most hospitably. So many and so great were the services he rendered to the government and his fellow men, that in justice to him, he should have been in the receipt of a liberal pension during the last 30 years of his life at least. But although the government of the country failed in doing so in their duty to Benjamin Rixon, it is to be hoped that the people of this district will do honour to his memory in some suitable manner. He was 80 years old. There was an article in a local newspaper referring to, and the article stated, "White Tracker, a headliner. A man's heroic deeds finding lost people went unrecognised when accounted, and he died a pauper." Ben Rixon was an Illawarra identity who turned his hands to many trades, including dairy farmer, coach driver, mail contractor and road builder. But it was his talents as a white bush tracker for which he became best known. He was the son of convicts James Rixon and Amelia Goodwin. He was born in 1806, the first baby born of the first white triplets born in Australia. He and his family settled in Illawarra in 1839 and acquired a land grant at American Creek near Fig Tree. He began delivering mail by horseback between Wollongong and Campbelltown, and by 1840 was also carrying passengers. With his extensive bush skills and using convict labour, Ben was then paid to carve out a mountain pass and coach road from Woonona to Appin that opened in 1848. In 1856, it was noted that Dapto Road had been greatly improved under Ben's efforts, and in 1858 he was awarded the £440 contract to build the Cordo River Road from the Fig Tree to Cordo River, and then the construction of the English church at American Creek in 1860. But it was Ben's ability to track people in the bush, both those who had become lost and criminals on the run from the law, that made him a household name. After his presentation of the silver slaver and 100 sovereigns, he expressed that he hoped that he might be spared for many years in health and strength, but such was not to be. Hardship hit by September 1877, prompting for the Mercury letter writer to call on the public to rally for a public servant's pension on Ben's behalf. If the number of persons that he rescued from miserable deaths in the lonely bush were but reckoned up, the sum total would be truly astounding. He would travel for days and nights in search for them and rarely ever failed to find the object of his efforts. Despite an unestimable service to the Illawarra, the pension was never granted and Ben died a pauper in 1886, buried in an unmarked grave at Bulli. Never was any man treated more unfairly by this country than was the deceased, the Mercury wrote. And on the Australian War Memorial, there is a depiction of all the great-grandsons of Benjamin Rixon that fought in the war. And it's quite outstanding, actually, when you look at the amount of men that were descendants of Ben that served for the country. And I'll add that on my Facebook page. The second child of the triplets born was James Rixon Jr., who was born on the 5th of January 1806. He married his sister-in-law, Elizabeth Hore, so Anne Hore's sister, on the 27th of August 1833 at St Peter's Church of England, Campbelltown. The birth records for their children indicate that sometime between 1834 and 1838, Elizabeth and James moved from Aids to Taylor's Flat, which is now known as Cathcart, in the Toowoomba Valley area of southeast New South Wales. Presumably they were granted some land. James Rixon went on to become a hotel owner at Eden, and he was one of the very early hotel licensees in Bega. And there is a sign at Eden saying, "Historic site. At Eden's first land sale in 1843, William Hurst, merchant of Sydney, brought lots for £20. Bankruptcy forced Hurst to lease and sell both lots to James Rixon, farmer of Cathcart, who built this two-storey George-style building during the 1850s, of local stone, roofed in Welsh slate. The building was not completed and was locally known as the Half House. In 1868 to 1891, the building served as Eden's post and telegraph office and was a residence. It was restored from 1978 to 1992, and in 1993, the building was finally completed in Eden's centennial year. So on the 27th of June 1846, James Rixon Jr. was granted the publican's licence at the Crown and Anchor Hotel at Eden. And at one stage, he also operated the Ben Boyd whaling station in Eden. The family is mentioned in the museum. And James Rixon Jr. died on the 12th of September 1873 at Bega, New South Wales. According to his obituary, James was believed to be the first man who brought a bullock dray down from Monaro to Eden. Annette West writes that his death was after a long period of time of heart disease and not by an accidental fall in the commercial hotel, as believed by some. His wife Elizabeth ran the hotel for a year before it changed hands, and there is a newspaper article about Elizabeth's departure saying that she was going to take charge of a hotel near the wharf at Merimbula. The third child of James Rixon and Amelia Goodwin was Thomas Rixon, and he was born on the 8th of August 1808 at Windsor in New South Wales. He's listed in the 1828 census as living with his mother and his brother Ben. He married Anne Smith, who was born in Aids on the 28th of April 1834 at St Peter's Church of England in Campbelltown. Thomas also served as a police constable for a period, and he died on the 15th of August 1883 at Campbelltown. The fourth child, Henry John Rixon, was born on the 22nd of June 1810 and was baptised on the 14th of April 1811 at St Matthew's in Windsor. He married Elizabeth Seekings on the 2nd of April 1835 at St Peter's Church of England at Campbelltown, and he died on the 13th of June 1884 at Neligan near Bega. and Amelia's son to Robert Burrows. He was born on the 6th of October 1816 in Liverpool. Not much else is known of Robert Jr.'s life. He married Mary Smith in 1843 when he was 27 and died at his residence at Balmain in 1851, aged only 35. After his death, Mary Smith married John Long Horsey, and he was the principal superintendent of the convicts department. Mary died in 1865 in Woolloomooloo at aged only 46, and they had no children. So I hope you enjoyed learning about the first triplets that were born in colonised Australia. If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes